The velvet rope stood like an invisible wall between Nia and the event she had every right to enter. Dressed in an elegant black gown, she held her invitation firmly in her hand, her name embossed in gold lettering. Yet, the security guard in front of her barely glanced at it. "I'm sorry, miss, but this area is restricted," he said, his voice flat and final. Nia raised an eyebrow. "I'm on the guest list." He smirked. "I don't think so." The people behind her whispered, some watching with pity, others with curiosity. But Nia didn't waver. She knew what this was. The dismissive glance, the lack of effort in checking her name, the way he had let 3 people walk past without even stopping them. She inhaled deeply, keeping her composure. "I'd like you to check again." The guard sighed, clearly annoyed, and gave the clipboard a lazy once-over before shaking his head. "Nope, you're not on here." Before she could respond, a voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" The crowd shifted as a tall man in a sharp navy suit approached. His presence alone made people step aside. The guard straightened, suddenly alert. Nia turned, recognizing him instantly. It was Damian Sinclair, the event's host and one of the most powerful executives in the city. The guard's confidence wavered. "She doesn't have clearance." Damian's sharp eyes scanned Nia, then flicked to the invitation in her hand. His expression darkened. "You mean to tell me that my guest of honor isn't allowed inside?" The color drained from the guard's face. I didn't know." Damian didn't let him finish. "You didn't check." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The security guard, who had been so dismissive just moments ago, now looked like he wanted to disappear. I'm so sorry, ma'am," he stammered, his arrogance gone, replaced with desperation. "I didn't realize." But Nia had already stepped past him, walking toward Damian, her head held high. She didn't need an apology. She had already made her point. As Nia walked past the humiliated guard, she felt the weight of 100 stares pressing against her back. Some were filled with curiosity, others with quiet admiration. But she didn't pause, didn't let the moment consume her. She had spent years navigating spaces like this, where power was assumed rather than earned, where gatekeepers decided who belonged and who didn't. Damian fell in a step beside her, his voice low but firm. "I apologize for that nonsense. It won't happen again." Nia gave a small nod, her expression unreadable. "I appreciate that." Inside, the event was a picture of opulence. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a golden glow, and waiters in pristine uniforms glided through the crowd, offering champagne and delicacies. Conversations hummed around her, powerful voices discussing business deals, investments, and industry shifts. As they made their way deeper into the room, Nia could feel the guard's panicked energy still lingering behind her. He had made a critical mistake, and now he knew it. But she wasn't interested in his regret. She had bigger things to focus on. Damian led her to a private table near the stage, where high-profile guests were seated. As she settled into her chair, a woman in an emerald gown leaned toward her with an amused smile. Quite the entrance. Nia smirked, picking up her champagne flute. It always is. Before the conversation could continue, a frantic presence hovered at the edge of the table. Nia turned to see the same security guard, his face flushed with nerves. "Miss, I just wanted to say, I was completely out of line," he stammered. "I should have checked properly. It won't happen again. I am truly sorry." Nia studied him for a moment, letting the silence stretch between them. He looked uncomfortable, shifting on his feet, desperate for her forgiveness. Finally, she tilted her head slightly. "I don't need an apology," she said calmly. "I need you to do better." His shoulders sagged with relief, and he nodded vigorously. "I will. I promise." She offered a polite, knowing smile before turning back to the table, dismissing him with her presence alone. The night continued, filled with speeches, laughter, and strategic conversations. But one thing was certain: no one in that room would ever underestimate Nia again. As the night progressed, Nia settled into the elegant rhythm of the event. She was no stranger to these gatherings, lavish affairs where power moved in whispers and alliances were sealed with a handshake. But tonight was different. She wasn't just another guest in the room. She was the guest of honor, and everyone knew it now. As she sipped her champagne, She felt Damien's gaze on her. "I want to introduce you to someone," he said, nodding toward a distinguished older man across the room. "James Caldwell. He's been in the industry for decades, one of the most influential figures in finance." Nia nodded, setting her glass down. "Let's make it happen." They wove through the glittering crowd, passing groups engaged in hushed but animated conversations. As they approached Caldwell, the man turned, his sharp blue eyes scanning Nia with curiosity. "James," Damien greeted, shaking his hand. "I want you to meet Nia Holloway. She's the reason we're all here tonight." Caldwell's expression shifted, a polite smile forming. "Ah, the woman of the hour," he said, extending his hand. "I've heard quite a bit about you." Nia met his handshake with confidence. "All good things, I hope." He chuckled. "Mostly, though I suspect you prefer to let your work speak for itself." She smiled. "Always." The conversation turned to business, market trends, investments, the shifting landscape of power. Nia held her own, her insights sharp, her words deliberate. Caldwell listened intently, nodding in agreement more than once. "You're impressive," he finally said, raising his glass. "I'd like to continue this discussion soon, perhaps over dinner." Before Nia could respond, a sudden voice cut through the moment. "Excuse me, Miss Holloway." She turned to find the same security guard standing nearby, looking almost out of breath. The crowd around them quieted slightly, sensing the tension. Nia arched an eyebrow. "Yes." He swallowed hard. I was hoping for a chance to make things right." The silence that followed was heavy. The weight of the night, of what had happened at the entrance, still hung between them. The question wasn't whether he was sorry. The question was, what was he willing to do about it? Nia glanced at Damien, then at Caldwell, before finally meeting the guard's nervous gaze. "Go on," she said, her voice steady. "I'm listening." The security guard's hands fidgeted at his sides, his once confident stance now reduced to uncertainty. The murmurs around them grew as guests discreetly watched the interaction unfold. He cleared his throat. I judged you before I even checked the list," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I assumed you didn't belong. And that was wrong." Nia crossed her arms, letting his words settle. There was no anger in her expression, no hostility, just quiet control. "And now," he exhaled sharply, "now I realize I wasn't just enforcing a rule. I was reinforcing a mindset that shouldn't exist." For the first time, genuine regret flickered in his eyes. He wasn't just saying what he thought she wanted to hear. He had been forced to confront something uncomfortable about himself. Damien, standing beside her, observed the exchange carefully, but said nothing. This was Nia's moment, and she handled it exactly as she always did, with grace, poise, and power. A waiter passed by, offering more champagne, but Nia didn't reach for a glass. Instead, she studied the man in front of her. "What do you expect from me?" she asked, her tone neutral. The guard hesitated, then shook his head. "Nothing," he admitted. "I don't deserve anything from you. I just needed you to know I understand now." A long silence stretched between them. Then slowly Nia nodded. "Good." The tension eased slightly, and the security guard, unsure whether to stay or go, took a small step back. But Nia wasn't done. "There's one thing you can do," she added, tilting her head slightly. He straightened. "Anything." She glanced around the room. "Next time someone walks up to you, no matter how they look, no matter what you assume, give them the same respect you would give anyone in this room." The guard nodded solemnly. "I will." Nia held his gaze for a beat longer, then finally dismissed him with a small nod. He turned and walked away, his posture less stiff, his steps more thoughtful. Caldwell, who had been watching silently, chuckled softly. "You know, Nia, I think you just taught a lesson that some of us spent a lifetime avoiding." She smirked, finally picking up her champagne flute. "Some lessons are long overdue." The conversation shifted back to business, and the night continued, but the air in the room had changed. Nia hadn't just earned her place, she had redefined it. As the night drew to a close, the energy in the room had shifted. Nia could feel it. Respect where there had once been doubt, admiration where there had once been hesitation. She wasn't just another guest anymore. She was a force in the room, someone whose presence carried weight. She moved through the crowd with ease, exchanging pleasantries with executives, shaking hands with investors, and cementing connections that would last long after the night ended. The whispers of her earlier encounter with the security guard had spread, but not as gossip, rather, as a moment of reckoning. A reminder that power wasn't just about titles or money. It was about presence, conviction, knowing who you were and never asking for permission to be seen. As she made her way toward the exit, Damien fell in a step beside her. "You handled that perfectly." She smirked. "Did you expect anything less?" He chuckled. "Never." As they reached the entrance, the same security guard stood at his post, but this time, when he saw Nia, his posture changed. No longer stiff with authority, no longer indifferent. Instead, he gave her a small, respectful nod. Not out of obligation, but out of understanding. She returned the nod, a silent acknowledgement, before stepping past him and out into the night. The cool air greeted her, crisp and refreshing. As she walked toward the car waiting for her, she took a deep breath, letting the moment settle. This was just the beginning. She wasn't here to ask for a seat at the table. She was here to change the whole damn room.